Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transportation Talks. My name is Michelle Livingstone, and I have the privilege of serving as the moderator for Transportation Talks, which is sponsored by the Transportation and Supply Chain Institute at the University of Denver. In this role, I've had an opportunity to interview some great leaders in the industry, and today is no exception. I am so excited to invite Ryan Houfek, Chief Commercial Officer for DCLI, to join me on camera. Ryan, hello.
Hi,
It's
Michelle.
great. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're so excited to hear all about your story. To kick us off, tell us all about you. We don't want you to leave out any details. Tell us where
First,
you grew up, to give us
okay,
all.
okay. Well, I mean, like first off, I've watched some of your show. I've seen your guest list. So I'm going to do my best to run with those big dogs that you had on here. And thanks to everybody who's watching, for tuning into the Chassis Guy. So anyhow, we'll try to make it interesting for everybody. Yeah, I'm let's see, married, got 3 kids. My oldest son just started at UCF. My youngest son is 4. We live in Jacksonville. Grew up in Virginia Beach. Went to the University of Virginia, and in my senior year, they had a job fair, and happened to find CSX by chance, who paid more than everybody else did. So that's what I did. That was about as strategic of my career path as I got. Served them for 10 years, was with Norfolk Southern for 8, split the 2 with 3 years at CMA CGM. Ultimately, kind of the railroad I sort of just had an itch that the railroad just couldn't scratch anymore. Maybe that's the best way to put it. So I was interested in something new. I had this lifelong dream as a child to work for the chassis industry. I'm glad. Yeah. No, but I was given an opportunity, and frankly, I sort of call it serendipity. Even though chassis is the most glamorous asset, I'm not the coolest kid at the cocktail party when I talk about what I do. But it's probably among the happiest I've ever been in my career.
Oh, well, that's great. Tell me, what did you major in when you were in college?
Economics, which I actually do benefit from that. It was a great major. So, and then ultimately go to business school and all the stuff, which I think we'll talk about. But yeah, econ.
Okay, I was just curious. There are not a lot of people who actually get into transportation because they majored in transportation supply chain.
Right.
So I'm always hopeful. But that's okay. We like econ majors, and it's also a great opportunity to just remind folks that you can be in any part of business and come into transportation supply chain because it's a microcosm of the economy in general. So that's
Absolutely
terrific.
Well said.
Okay, so tell us about DCLI. I don't know that everyone is fully familiar with them. So tell us, I think it was formed in 2009. And what was the genesis behind that? And tell us everything we need to know.
Actually, 2012 was sort of us born as a standalone company, and so I guess first off, if you don't know that story, perhaps you're newer to the industry. So I did kind of want to do a quick plug. If you are new to the industry, if you're a student, et cetera, I think you've made a great choice to be in the transportation arena. I always think that a true barometer for what people think of their career is whether they kind of usher their kids into that space. And for me, the answer is I would, absolutely would. It's been a really fulfilling ride. So anyhow, a quick version of the chassis story, if you don't know it. Born in 2012, and fundamentally that was when the ocean carriers began to divest their chassis fleets. So chassis had long been a financial albatross to the ocean carrier industry. It was an industry at the time that was really struggling to be profitable. And so one of them had the courage to sell off their assets. That was Maersk in 2012. And one by one, ocean carriers sold off their fleets to either DCLI or one of our 2 major competitors. Kind of long story short, we started with about 60,000 chassis. Those were the Maersk chassis. We still have baby blue chassis out there. And then we bought fleets from HMM, from NYK, Hapag-Lloyd. So we kind of have a rainbow of chassis there. Fast forward today, we have just under 300,000 chassis, roughly split between marine, and then we have a domestic 53-foot chassis franchise as well.
That's great. What a growth story there. So that's
And we're
tremendous.
headquartered in Charlotte because when we were spun off from Maersk, they had a little equipment subsidiary called MESC, and they spun that off, and we were actually co-located in their headquarters for a while until we got our own office space. So that's why you find DCLI headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina today.
Okay. Yeah, well, great. Well, I appreciate the background on that. So you're Chief Commercial Officer. So tell us what is all entailed in that role and what prepared you to take on that role.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of tactical answer for what that role does is, all customer facing activities are under my leadership with my team. And so for DCLI, that's not just, sales and marketing, and customer service, but it's also road service. So there's an opportunity there where something goes wrong and we got an opportunity to really shine and make something right. So we took that on as a customer facing component of my team. So I got a big road service team as well. Certainly our major charter is growth, right? And by charter, I mean mandate, right? from our owners. No pressure. We've got lofty growth objectives, and again, a fair amount of pressure to achieve them. So that's the role of commercial, is to the growth side of the equation. We've got an amazing operating department. Those guys have got to run a difficult business, keep costs down, service our customers, but we got to grow the business. And so in that regard, the name of the game is, number one, having a great strategy, adhering to that strategy over the long term is sort of your North Star. Number two, having a great product. Don't give oxygen to alternatives to your company's services. And then number three is, through my lens anyhow, is relationships. Despite procurement department's best efforts to sort of strip relationships out of the equation, because relationships are not always the best path to the lowest cost, they still really matter in our industry. And so that's been a huge part of what our team does, is building deep relationships at every level. I would say, just so everybody knows, I got to see these questions beforehand, so I got to cheat a little bit and I got to reflect on this question. It took me a while in my career to get to this level. And what I want to do with it is have an outsized impact on shaping my company, my employer, to become great. We all know Jim Collins, good to great, sort of greatness, use that word. I've always wanted to work for a great company. And I still work for one that still has work to do, right? To sort of achieve that level. And I'm finally really in a position to influence that in a more outsized way than I've ever been able to in my career. And so kind of this idea of what got you here won't get you there. Being good at sales was sort of what got me moving up the ladder along my career. But now what's demanded of me, what I think what really makes somebody a great CCO or anybody in the C-suite is about building something better, better for your customers, better for your employees. And that's, for me, what's so supercharging for me. I get to actually be in the cockpit of making a great company. And now at the same time, I really miss that sales side. I really miss being on sales calls and all those things. And I fall into that trap so many people do, which is they revert to the thing that got them there, to the detriment of the people that work for you, right? And so I have to remind myself, get out of their way. They're really good people that are on my team, and let them do what they do really well. And then I can kind of zoom out. So yeah, I guess this doesn't fall into the rambling category. I'd say the last thing I'd say, especially to kind of the younger members of the audience here, is sort of the traits and what kind of got you there is you're not always going to be the smartest person in the room. There's always going to be somebody smarter than you, right? The one thing you can control is you can outwork anybody. That's the one in your control. And fundamentally, that's kind of that's the show. That's what matters the most, is your work ethic and ability to outwork others. So long answer,
no,
sorry.
Oh, no, it's a great answer. And I love to start off with the strategy. And, that has to have been particularly important over the last couple of years because, everything, was booming after COVID, and then it's been down. The last couple of years have been kind of soft. So to your point about the mandate of going out and growing the business, I'd have to say that'd be kind of challenging the last couple of years. Or did you, or were folks really starting to look for an improvement and an enhancement, and this was a quick way for customers to do something maybe they had thought about doing before, but now had more motivation to make the
I would
change?
say it was a catalyst, as it was in so many ways. It wasn't necessarily a great catalyst for a chassis provider, meaning for 2 entire years, 24 plus months, we were stocked out of chassis because dwell cycle times doubled and all those things sucked up so much capacity. The whole system was gummed up. The chassis were sort of caught up in that. Freight will find a way. And it did. I mean, insofar as the chassis was part of the problem as to why stuff couldn't get to shelves. And so a lot of truckers went out and procured a lot of assets that are now in the system. And so that's now a bit of a competitive headwind for us is there's a lot of capacity that came on. And that's true for trucking and probably so many other things. There's just a surge and, gold rush and building and adding and all those things that you have to, there's that hangover. We're in the hangover. That's a nasty one. So.
Well, hey, if it were easy, anyone would be doing these jobs. So
that's right.
Yeah, so what luck, there's a challenge to overcome. So that's right. That's good news. So speaking about challenges to overcome, obviously there's a lot of conversation on the East Coast with the ILA negotiations. Typically as a shipper, when the ILA is renegotiating contracts, historically, we haven't gotten too excited about that. And because they typically settled and there hasn't been as much disruption as on the West Coast. But this time around, it sounds like there's more likelihood of something happening. Yeah. And we know that even a day delay creates a lot of headwind in the system. From a DCLI perspective, because customers have traditionally not necessarily moved their shipments to another port on the West Coast, and they've stayed on the East Coast, but now I would imagine you are seeing some flow to other ports. What does that do? How does DCLI respond to those types of pressures in the network?
It's sort of par for the course for us. So that's our whole reason for being, is to take chassis where they're not needed and put them where they are needed. And so there are these sort of big shifts. We're used to, you sort of say, this is a big one. There's always been a big one. There's always, people call it the black swan, all these things. There's always some black swan and that we're reacting to. And so it can be expensive. I mean, you got to spend a lot of money to send chassis all over creation to chase changes. And then when the changes are over, and sometimes you got to send them back. And we're not, don't shed a tear for DCLI. We're fine. It's sort of, again, a cost of doing business for us. And in this case, we're just looking to the marine terminals, to the ocean carriers, to the railroads, whatever they're doing, however they're responding. We just need to be tapped in and able to do what we do, which is, and the good news is we have, as I was saying, our earlier problem, which is we have sort of far too many chassis right now for what demand we have out there. So we have a lot of dry powder to work with here.
Well, that's good news. That is really good news. So you mentioned a couple of competitors. How do you find DCLI? Because it seems like a chassis is a chassis. I mean, is it truly just a common asset and any chassis will do, or how is it that DCLI finds itself differentiating from your competitors?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think certainly we're unique in that we have both the marine and domestic offerings. So we have a unique value proposition for a lot of the stakeholders. Our domestic franchise is 150,000 chassis and that serves domestic intermodal. But on the marine side, we are vigorously trying to answer your question, right? How in an asset that doesn't allow in and of itself for a lot of differentiation, how do you stand out, right? So I think about that spectrum of, say, gasoline to iPhone. We're on the gasoline side of the spectrum, right? And so you have service excellence, right? You service your customers better. you have relationships. And I think on both, we're trying to be the most trucker-centric company in our field. They are the ones that sort of have the most outsized influence in the marketplace. You think about ocean carriers, but it's really the trucker. They're also the hardest to please. And so if we're successful in doing that, frankly, it'll make us a better company. And ideally one that has the edge that you're describing.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, I appreciate you sharing. It does seem like an opportunity. Really, it's all about the service piece, and that is a big deal for everyone. And
Plus a bunch of super top secret stuff that my competitors should be terrified about that I just
yeah. I know you have them shaking. It's okay.
Manhattan projects, whatever, Skunkworks, you name it. We got all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, what else is DCLI focused on, and what's really important to DCLI right now?
Well, I've already referenced we need to be a better company, and we've really got to get better at having an asset that a motor carrier. I mean, I think most of these motor carriers, thousands of them that are small, they're vulnerable, right? It's a tough business, and if they depend on our asset and it's not there, we can really ruin their day, their week, their customer relationships, all those things.
Sure.
So, like I said, we are pivoting to a company that's sort of born of ocean carriers and sort of ocean carrier centric, to being really defining excellence, defining greatness through the lens of the motor carrier. And if you get that right, ocean carriers are relatively easy, and everybody else in the chain, BCOs, et cetera. So that's the big frontier for us, and you do that with people, process, technology, culture, strategy, all those things. So that's the show.
Okay, well, that's great.
Yeah.
And what about on the sustainability and innovation side?
Yeah.
What's the big focus?
On the sustainability side, I would say that the lowest hanging fruit from a carbon impact on transportation is the conversion of cargo from the highway to the rail intermodal system. That's the big show for me. And we would spend billions to be a bigger and bigger part of that story. In fact, we already did. We had some 50,000 domestic chassis built over the past few years, and that hit that kind of $1 billion mark. Chassis got expensive when the tariffs hit them and all those things. So that's part of the equation. But frankly, we'd do it again. We want to underpin that highway to rail story. That for us is kind of our biggest contribution. Now, we also inherited hundreds of thousands of bias-ply tires that have a lot of consequences on fuel economy and just sort of how frequently you have to change them out and all those things. And we're converting all that to radial, all those things. But to me, the big story is highway to rail and our role there. On the innovation front, I mean, we got to talk GPS. Michelle, I gotta be honest, this is kind of a big deal. This is sort of my first big public reveal in that regard. So we have just gotten the approval from our board to upfit our entire domestic fleet with GPS. We've selected partners. We're sort of on the eve of a massive effort, and my heart goes out to our operating department to corral 150,000 chassis and get those things installed. So look, I mean, I don't think anyone's going, wow, GPS, right? It's not the most innovative thing. It's been here since the 90s, but it's probably the single largest effort to apply it to chassis. And sort of allows us to hone our service to customers and all those things. And we're using, on the tech side, the tech's gotten good. And we're using sort of the latest tech that's come a long way. So I think 8-year battery life and some of those things which seemed pretty distant not that long ago.
Yeah, well, hey, I love the fact that you shared this breaking
right here,
news
live
on Transportation Talks. So that's really exciting. And GPS may seem a little basic, but it is so important. Knowing where something is huge, and being able to track it. And I'm sure that that's going to help both the asset management component of it as well as the service component of it, just to know where something is definitively.
Certainly in ways that we've figured out, it will help, and then probably ways that we don't know yet that it'll be valuable. Kind of like positive train control did to the railroads. Like they discovered ways that could add value to the shareholders, et cetera. So that's right.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting. Congratulations on getting that approved. That's a big investment and a big deal. So I think good things will happen as a result. So DCLI has ownership changes over the span of the 15 years that
Yeah.
you've been in business. Tell us, it's currently owned by 3 different foreign companies. Tell us about that and what impact did that have on the culture of the company?
Yeah. It's been terrific, and that's not a dig on our past owners. We've had good owners, but prior to this ownership, it has been for us sort of pure play private equity, and that means for those who haven't sort of been exposed to private equity, it means relatively short hold periods. Like they want to buy you, they want to kind of juice your profits and then sell you and make money. That's what they're thinking. They're there to make money. You go through a sales process every 3 or 4 years. Ultimately what that can do is lead to short-term decision-making, non-strategic decision-making, trepidation on spending CapEx, for example. And then of course the sales process is a huge distraction for all of management, et cetera, in terms of running the business. Our new owners are pure play infrastructure. And I've learned a lot about the distinction between the two. So think decades long hold, lower margin expectations, so it's much more stable, sort of steady cash flows kind of thing. That is why what I'll say again, we're happy to go spend billions more on chassis. Like they are like, hey, how can we deploy more capital? We like this business. Huge difference. And then they've been great. I mean, we got one out of sort of Kuwait/London. You've got one out of Singapore and one out of Canada. So they're very culturally diverse. But that doesn't mean that they're trying to impose different culture on us. We've got an awesome culture at DCLI. And so they think they recognize that and kind of stay out of the way in that regard. But it's been good. It's a good question. And everybody has to adapt to everybody, right? Everything's new. It's been about a year or so. It goes to I'm flying, as we talked about. But it's been good. And I think it's going to make us a stronger company in the long term because of that long-term aspect.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, I'm glad that it's worked out well, and that long-term perspective, certainly from an operator, really makes a big difference. You feel like you can make a commitment, you can follow through on it, you can tell your customers that. So that's great. So we have a couple questions in the chat here on the Q&A, and just wanted to run this by. So one of the questions actually is about the maintenance of chassis having been a problem for shippers. Is that still a concern, or what is DCL's maintenance strategy?
It's a going concern in the sense that we, on the marine side of the house, we are dependent upon union labor, ILWU and ILA labor to do our repairs on the terminals. And so on the marine terminals, it's harder in so many regards to kind of be in control of your cost and maintenance destiny in that regard. At the railroad facilities, it's much easier. Sort of our vendors that we can hold accountable to us. It is not a slight on any kind of union or anything to that effect, but it does just makes it a more complicated kind of equation for us. I would say that at a high level, it speaks to what I was saying before about we need to be better for the trucker. That chassis needs to be available in good condition every time in every location we service our customers, and without extensive lines of time and roadability, without road service issues, that kind of thing. So I would say it's a great question. We've not cracked the code and we have not arrived, but that is the number one. We are essentially a maintenance company that has its own chassis, right? That's what we are. And we've got to get better at it. I'll be honest.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And the other question that's come in is talking about how you determine where to proactively move chassis to. We talked about it a little bit in terms of, hey, you kind of figure out where the need is and it's just an ongoing part, but is there a lot of data analytics that goes into that? Predictive? Are you using generative AI to help figure that out? How are you going about that?
Yeah, I mean, about half our business is linked to major providers of the cargo, so like an ocean carrier, and they give us extensive forecasting, and they're actually gotten quite good in collaborating with them, quite good on the domestic side with collaborating with our biggest domestic customers on the domestic side. Think, Hub Group, for example. It underpins our relationship is that data, because if we fail them, we're failing all the truckers and all those things, right? And yes, we've got a logistics team that analyzes data. That we have a lot of analysts, that kind of thing. I couldn't quite call it AI. My guess is that's where it's all going. That the things that we try to interpret as human beings, it's going to get so much better, and through AI channels. I haven't asked them if they've plugged in, data into ChatGPT-4 and see what happens, but it's a good thought.
It is kind of fun to play with.
But we just, it's at the end of the day, there's a reason why you have specialization. All we do morning to night is think about chassis, about their repair, about their positioning, logistics. We're all in the same team in the sense that when we fail to have a chassis somewhere, we've lost revenue, not to mention affected somebody else's business and lose customers that way. So we're all kind of aligned with the same goals. And again, perfection has not been achieved, but we're working on it.
Yeah, no, really, the chassis are such a critical part. And I don't know that everyone really gives chassis the full respect that they deserve. So you should be number one at those cocktail parties. Everybody should want to talk to you about that, because
it does speak to that person's question, that data and then ultimately AI and machine and sort of predictive analytics needs a ton of data. GPS is going to give us an enormous amount of data on the domestic side. It's a little trickier to GPS your fleet on the marine side, because in many cases they're in great pools. So think LA there, and so you're just part of the system that doesn't matter which chassis a container lands on, right?
Right.
So you can't. It's just murkier on the marine side.
Sure. Sure. No, I can appreciate that. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to acknowledge and appreciate DCLI for the support of sending students on a regular basis to the Transportation Supply Chain Institute. I know you send your high potential students and your definitely your future leaders, your future executive team, hopefully will all be DCLI or related folks from the program. So why is it that DCLI finds it worthy of investing in their employees, and how does DCLI look at TSCI, way too many acronyms there, to decide to send students there as opposed to other options?
That's an interesting question. Every person you look at individually and say, hey, do they need to have a wider aperture, full MBA, sort of a generic business acumen type development there, or are they already strong in so many business regards? And what we really need is for them to become more connected, more sort of conversant in the transportation arena. And so it helps you. It's not entirely binary. Denver has MBA aspects to the program, quite a bit of it, and certainly in MBA you can do some majors in the supply chain space. At the end of the day, I've seen people who've gone into Denver come out better. Proof is in the pudding, right? That's why we keep sending them there. We just hired another graduate, Abby Anderson, who's a new leader in our operating department. And ultimately, too, for like an MBA or Denver, for me as a hiring manager, I know how hard it is, how much of an imposition on your life it is. And it says to me that if you go through that, if you're willing to do that, I already know before I interview you that you're no stranger to sacrifice and hard work, and that's so important. So that has in and of itself appeal. So whether you do an MBA or Denver, any kind of graduate program says a lot about you as a person, I think. But yeah, no, it's a tricky one as to whether you do. I would say if you could get into Harvard MBA, you should probably go to Harvard MBA. But if it's a local school, and sometimes it's a lifestyle choice and what you can and can't do with your family and everything else. So it's a complicated equation. They're all good.
Yes, it absolutely is. But the hybrid format that we have at the Institute actually helps a working student be able to manage their schedule, I think, a little easier than trying to commit 2 full years to
I haven't
a
seen it
new
break
media
any heart
program.
yet. It seems like, but it's still hard and
Sure.
great accomplishment for sure.
Well, and we appreciate Mike O'Malley, who is an adjunct professor.
Professor O'Malley, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So we appreciate him, and Abby is on the board as well. So we appreciate her, her active participation too. So
She's
we
been
really
great.
want to just say thank you from the bottom of our heart for the continued support of DCLI. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here and do applause all around. Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise. And it was a lot of fun having a conversation with you, and look forward to continuing to cross paths with you for sure. And for our audience, I just want to let you know that this replay, along with all of the other transportation talks, are available on your favorite social media platform, whatever that is. YouTube and LinkedIn are the two most popular, but you can find them in other places as well. And I see that Anna has put down, if you would like more information about the program and the Executive Masters in Transportation Supply Chain Management, that's available through the school. We'd love to tell you more about it. So on that note, we will bid you all adieu and look forward to seeing you next time around. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Have a great day.